youth and women, representative of law enforcement institutions in Brisbane, ladies and gentlemen, I feel very honored indeed to be received by you so that we can share our ideas and aspirations as regard what is happening in our country. From the outset, I would like to say that I'm not here to create division among South Sudanese community in Brisbane, nor I'm here to incite violence or hatred among you. I'm here simply to create positive and constructive awareness and to try to share with you ideas which we hope might contribute to the development of an inclusive and sustainable South Sudan. And therefore, I think that I'm here as a peace and love monger, not a war monger. So I would like to in fact, the last speakers have made my work extremely very easy because they have actually brought forward very important issues which are disturbing us in our country, and issues which are connected with various levels of governance in the country, and issues which interrogation seems to elude many of us as communities of political interest and other sociocultural groups. In fact, I have visited several countries. I was in Canada, the US, and the UK, and here, and I've been to several African countries also. The main reason is that I would like to hear and see what the Equatoria or the Equatorians in diaspora think, and also other South Sudanese think about the current situation in our country. And I'm visiting these countries in my capacity as the chairperson of the Greater Equatorial Council of Rights, which is not an NGO. It is a political organization. Regardless of the word council, it is saturated in political ideals which must be operationalized as part of the process to finding just, inclusive solutions to various problems which are facing us. Why did we call it Greater Equatorial Council of Rights? I will concur with several of the speakers that Equatoria as a geographical entity and as a community of socio-cultural groups has always been pivotal in the existence of South Sudan as geography and human society. I also concur with them that from the establishment of modern Sudan until the CPA, Greater Equatorial people have always been the political opinion makers. And therefore, we in Greco think that Equatoria as peoples abandoned this responsibility. Maybe not due to their own objective decision to abandon this important role. Maybe it is due to political and other variables without their control. Nevertheless, we in Greco believe that current unfavorable developments that occur in the country have occurred because of ubiquitous absence of Equatoria in the political process, especially from 2005, after the signing of the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. Yes, others will say that, but there are people from Greater Equatoria in the various government structures and in the governance of South Sudan. And Greco will answer that let us not be blinded with numbers, because historically, Greater Equatoria has not been represented by numbers only, it has been represented by quality. And therefore, what I think, and we think in Greco, is that quality was not considered as of essence in the presentation of Greater Equatoria in the governance of South Sudan from 2005 until 2013. And because of this, and I'm not going to go into the political history of South Sudan because the previous speakers have actually enlightened this audience enough. I would rather go to why actually Greco was established immediately after the unfavorable crisis in South Sudan. In fact, the genocide which was committed in South Sudan against the Nuer people, genocide which was committed by the government which the people of South Sudan elected, and which, due to its intentions and conducts, have degenerated to a level of a political villain, and therefore brought the Republic of South Sudan into disrepute as a constitution and as a sovereign state. And therefore we think that it is our duty of care as members of South Sudan, and in general, and especially as Equatorians, that we have constitutional duty of care, and human duty of care, and legal duty of care, and in fact, comprehensive duties and other fiduciary duties that we have to stand up and intervene in what is happening in our Sudan, in southern Sudan, in order to evade total collapse of the society. Because we believe that what has happened to the Nuer people can easily happen to any one of us in South Sudan. Because the government in Juba has the moral capacity and has the political will, and because it has monopolized sovereign violence in the form of the army and other security organizations, the government in Juba shall never hesitate to inflict the same hurt on any other community in South Sudan. Because the way the genocide was committed in Juba during the month of December indicates that the government has actually adopted genocidal intentions and conducts as some of its mechanisms of governance. And therefore, we in Greco believe that we ignore these indicators to our own detriment, and that it is our duty to stand up and stop this government from continuing to inflict the same hurts and criminal conduct on us. And we've come to conclusion that because of what I've just described as culpable and criminal conduct of the government, that the government in Juba has lost its sovereign legitimacy, because it is no more the sovereign that people elected. And we believe that we should not be blinded by the mere conduct of election and the voting in of the government. We did not vote in the government to slaughter and kill women and children and innocent others. We did not vote in this government in order to monopolize the sovereign violence in the form of the army. In fact, we did not vote in this government to privatize the country in the interest of a specific ethnic group. And because of all these intentions and conducts, the government legally and constitutionally is no more relevant. And therefore, we formed Greco and we went to Addis Ababa. And we met with the IGAD mediators. I sat with them individually. I sat with General Sembowe, and I sat with Ambassador Mesrin, and I sat with Lieutenant General Abda, and we discussed the issues in South Sudan. In fact, to the extent that in my meeting with Lieutenant General Sembowe, he asked me whether I am a South Sudanese. And I told him that yes, I am a South Sudanese. And that he has never heard these narratives before. Why are these narratives not being apparent? I told him that because you people always listen to a particular, a minority opinion in South Sudan. A minority that has projected itself in the international and regional arenas as being the sole people of South Sudan. And the narratives that we have heard from me represent the narratives which is actually entertained by the majority of peoples of South Sudan. And I told General Zimbabwe that I represent almost the opinion of 63, if not 4, of the other ethnic groups in South Sudan. The gentleman told me that that same week he was flying back to Kenya and was going to brief President Uhuru that the situation in South Sudan is more dangerous than what they have expected. And in fact, to the extent that when the heads of states and governments came to Addis to meet, the meeting in which Salva Kiir was actually dragged to it, kicking and crying because he didn't want to come, but he was warned that if you do not attend that meeting, the regional authorities, represented by IGAD, were going to take collective action against the government. So he came. And as part of answering one of the questions raised by the representative of the Equatoria Association in Brisbane, whether Greco is recognized by IGAD, in fact, 2 items in the final communique of the head of state and governments were actually our presentation to IGAD. And not only that, we had a news conference in which we declared to the whole world that Greco is part and parcel of the negotiating process in Addis Ababa, and that it represents the voices of Greater Equatoria. And that has been documented and noted. And I met Troika, this is the European outfit, and also I met several ambassadors in Addis Ababa. And when I was in Canada, in the US, and in the UK, Greco was familiar theme in government circles. And therefore, yes, Greco is taken note of by regional and international players. Why did we call it Greco? We call it Greco because if you look at the political scenario on the ground in South Sudan, you realize that the negotiation which is taking place in Addis Ababa is monopolized by South Sudanese from Bahr al-Ghazal and Upper Nile on both sides, on Dr. Riyad's side and also on the government side. It gives you, as a South Sudanese, as a discerning South Sudanese, as a knowledgeable South Sudanese, all of you are knowledgeable South Sudanese, that actually it is Bahr al-Ghazal and Upper Nile negotiating for the future reformation of South Sudan. And we realized that if we stood by and allowed Bahr al-Ghazal and Upper Nile to continue negotiating as regards the resolution to the current crisis, we shall again allow another formulation of second CPA in which people of Greater Equatoria shall be excluded. And because we know that the violence that occurred in December is not actually going to produce a similar structure of South Sudan. We know that South Sudan is going to be different. And because of this different future South Sudan, we decided that we have to be authors and owners of this future South Sudan. We don't want to stand by and act as if we are guests, because if you're a guest, you have privilege to attend certain party. And the organizers of the party have the right to exclude you, because all you have is a privilege, not a right. So we want to have right in future South Sudan. And that's why we impose ourselves. And I concur with you who say that you don't wait until somebody gives you, you have to take your right. And we know that the situation in South Sudan is that, to use a politically incorrect word, you have to grab your right. So we decided also that Greater Equatoria must have, because it already has the ability, the political ability, and other abilities to assert itself in South Sudan. Up to that level, we are satisfied in Greco that we have made a footprint, a political footprint in the current crisis. Now, the question that people always ask is, how are you going to influence this political process? Before we answered that question, we decided to look into the political history of South Sudan. And we discovered that South Sudan will never be very sustainable if we in Greater Equatoria do not produce the same infrastructures that used to be, whether they are military infrastructures or political infrastructures. Because we know that current South Sudan actually is premised on raw power, raw force. And in fact, we take into note the assertion by the president that he shall never negotiate with anybody in South Sudan as regards comprehensive political reformation of the country unless that other carries arms. That unless you are a rebel, he will never talk with you in terms of the betterment of governance in South Sudan. And when we went to Addis, we also noted that the government will never listen to the people of Greater Equatoria unless the people of Greater Equatoria can flex their military power. And this is not an incitement to any violence. This is not a promotion of a jingoistic culture in South Sudan. We are simply describing to you the facts, the political facts on the ground. And we are simply sharing with you the realities on the ground. And we are simply asking you questions as to if, therefore, you want to play a positive role in this political environment where politics are defined in terms of raw muscle power. How on earth are you supposed to make your voice heard? Should we stand by and allow, as somebody said earlier on, the history of South Sudan to be written without us? And we know that we have written the history of South Sudan until at least 1983, when John Garang went to the bushes of South Sudan. I might politely beg to differ with the literature which is being peddled in South Sudan that the late Dr. John Garang returned to the bushes of South Sudan because Jaafar Nimeri abrogated the Addis Ababa Agreement. To the best of my knowledge, because by that time I was already a fifth-year university student and an active young politician by then, also at the university level and also at other levels. Jaafar Nimeri only reacted to the demands by South Sudanese. In fact, to the demands of people of Greater Equatoria. When the same ethnic group abuse and misuse governance of South Sudan after the signing of the peace agreement within the remit of the High Executive Council, which was a regional government in which South Sudan was administered on the basis of the three regions, Equatoria, Upper Nile, and Bahr el Ghazal. The people of Greater Equatoria reached a point whereby they couldn't find political and other spaces in South Sudan, to the extent that they refused to continue to exist in that particular period of political history of South Sudan as underdogs. And they decided that South Sudan ought to be decentralized so that issues of tribalism, nepotism, and corruption are brought under control, so that also other people in South Sudan, especially the Greater Equatorial people, have their own, their positive share of what was happening in South Sudan. And therefore, that was why South Sudan was, in fact, divided into three regions. You can argue that Jaafar Nimeri could not believe the opportunity which was presented to him by the Southerners themselves. And I'm not defending the late Jaafar Nimeri, but I'm simply asserting political facts so that we don't mislead generations. So that when we take our future decision, we should take our future decision on valid facts. The valid facts are that Jaafar Nimeri reacted to the demand of South Sudanese, and he exploited the mismanagement of South Sudan by South Sudanese themselves. And therefore, he issued the decree, because in that, he was going to benefit. South Sudan was going to be weaker. But the people of Greater Equatoria were happy, because at least that particular ethnic group that was dominating was going to be out of the way. And that was why people went back to the bushes. In fact, not because of the declaration of Sharia law. That was not the reason. That was not the reason. Because the Sharia law, in fact, if you went back a little bit to that history, it was extremely irrelevant in South Sudan. But the reality was that people revolted again because of decentralization of South Sudan. And this is the same reason why many in that particular community that I refer to, in that particular ethnic group I refer to, are now against the concept and operationalization of federalism in South Sudan. Therefore, with that being the situation, we in Greco think that there is an obligation for us to talk to our peoples all over the world. We have already communicated. We are already talking with our people in South Sudan and elsewhere. And therefore, we embark on these trips so that we can talk with you. And we want to raise valid questions which are based on the situation on the ground, without necessarily being considered as being insightful of any other misconduct, whether legal or constitutional, in respect to your countries of residence. But we are simply raising these issues within the legal framework. We are simply saying that we want the diaspora to contribute within their civil and political rights to issues of human rights abuse, corruption, and many other discriminatory policies in South Sudan, such as tribalism, etc. And we also want to share with you very difficult questions. And these questions were raised by the youth, for example, represented, and also the women represented. Yes, ideally, we would like to see a South Sudan which is free from raw human violence. Ideally, we would like to see our youth growing up, being socialized into useful generation who shall lead the South Sudan in future. But practically on the ground, we know that the situation is that this ideal socialization of our youth is but an elusive aspiration. And we know that the situation on the ground is that the sanctity of our women and girls is but an elusive ideal, because our women and girls are being violated every single day in South Sudan. In fact, we know that this violation occurs because of institutionalized mechanisms of violation, whether it is through legalized pedophilia. Today you have government officials going to bed with children ranging between from 10 upwards in hotels built by public funds and managed by agents of these people in government, hotels which have been turned into brothels for abusing the very women and girls of South Sudan. In fact, the majority of them from Greater Equatoria. You don't see any girls and women from other regions in South Sudan being abused in this country. It is not that this section of our Sudanese women are deviants, are social deviants or moral deviants. It is that they've been reduced to positions whereby the conduct that they're subjected to is being normalized, either directly or indirectly. If you went outside the towns of South Sudan, you went to the villages, you will see, you will hear scenes and stories whereby our women and girls are subjected to immoralities by the use of sheer raw military force. And the question that one would like to ask oneself is, as a father, as a brother, as a husband, what can you do when you see your daughter, your sister, your wife being violated in front of you by somebody toting an AK-47, i.e. a Kalashnikov machine gun? When you see this category of female others being gang raped in front of you by people toting these machine guns, simply because you don't emanate from their tribe, and simply because you are not armed. And this goes on and on throughout Greater Equatoria. If you ask yourself, how are you supposed to defend these defenseless others who look up to you for this duty of defense? How are you supposed to defend your land which is being taken from you by force, because others are toting machine guns. And they are systematically displacing you from your land. How are you supposed to defend this property, which is the only assets that you have as a villager? How are you supposed to guarantee the future of your children, the future of your great-grandchildren, and your posterities, if you are not able to defend these assets, which are the only inheritance that they have? Then the question that one would ask oneself is, am I supposed to share the Southern Sudan with others as a corpse in a graveyard? Am I supposed to share the Southern Sudan with others as a homeless other, as a landless other, as an employed other, as a prostitute other, as a rape other? And if the answer to this question is no, then how am I supposed to make myself not become homeless if others are making me homeless because they carry firearms in a land which is lawless, in a land devoid of constitutionalism, in a land devoid of positive governance? How am I supposed to exist with those others who do not want me to exist because they use immutable characteristics for allocation of goods and services? I.e., I come from the Bari tribe. Let me use my own tribe as an example. If I were a ruler of South Sudan, for example, and then I passed the law that for anyone to access goods and services in South Sudan, she or he must be a Bari. Now, how many of you will access goods and services? There are no universities where you can enroll and then graduate as a Bari. You have to be born as a Bari. And therefore, these are conditions and criteria which cannot be achieved by anybody unless your accident of birth is such that you are born into a Bari family. And this is the kind of situation we are facing in South Sudan. We are forced to share South Sudan on the basis of these immutable characteristics, which many of us cannot have because we don't have the accident of birth to be born into those ethnicities. And all of this, we are asking ourselves, how are we supposed to exist in this country, short of protecting ourselves? Are we being violent if you want to protect yourself against a violent other? Even at common law, there is a right of self-defense, especially when the other wants to deprive you of your life. There is a right to self-defense. Even at common law, there is no doctrine that says that if somebody comes at you with a knife, that the law will ask you to use a carrot. There is no such law. But there is a law that if somebody comes at you with a knife, you have the right to use a knife. And you have the right to strike him in his heart. This is not incitement to violence. This is simply the operationalization of the criminal law of self-defense. So, at the constitutional level, at the governance level, if a government has armed part of population of a country, because this part of population belongs to the ethnic group that is ruling, and these arms are sovereign arms distributed to villages to go about a country to murder, massacre others. Are those being massacred and murdered do not have the same sovereign right to defend themselves? I think, as collective others, they have the right to defend themselves when the government have armed part of that nation to destroy part of the same nation. At law, when we speak about this, we are not inciting violence. We are simply interrogating existing facts on the ground in South Sudan. And Greco is disturbed by these facts, that time has come for people of Equatoria to stand up and say that enough is enough. And we are not going to stand by and allow others to kill their way through us, to rob and deprive us of all assets, for example, to put it very simply. So, therefore, I would rather answer some of these questions because I don't want to bore you with very open secret in terms of political history. Let me attempt to answer this question because answering this 8 question will bring forth some of the issues that we want to know. Is Greco, Council of Right, a party or a political organization? It is a very serious political organization. It is a political organization which is working very hard to establish and to affirm and to strengthen the role of Great Equatoria. This Greco has a following of very many energetic men and women of South Sudan, of Great Equatoria. Are you going to represent it as a civil society organization striving for peace or as a political entity in the current peace process? We are a political entity in the current peace process. And we are recognized as a political entity in the current peace process. If it is political, is it recognized by the mediators in the current peace talks in Addis Ababa? Yes, I've just explained it earlier on. We are very prominent and very ubiquitous in this process, as persons and as an organization. How is it going to be represented in the current peace talks? We are already being represented in the current peace talks, either through our ideas or through documentations and through individuals who are there. Simply because I'm in Australia does not mean that Greco is not being represented. Are you going as an entity of your own, or you will come under one of the warring parties or other groups such as SPLM, or Group of 7, or Group of 4? When I went to Addis and met with the mediators and others, I spoke with Dr. Riek Machar. And because between Riek Machar and I, there is familiarity. We know ourselves. In one time in our political history, I was one time the representative in Europe of SPLM United when the split happened. I was not member of the SPLM when it was started because of reasons that John Graham would not articulate the reasons to convince me to join them. But when in 1991, Riek Machar, Lamakol, and others split from the SPLM and paradoxically announced the principle of self-determination as a driving force, then I said, okay, let me try this one because at least it is clear. Then I became the official representative of SPLM in Europe, part of Europe, not the whole of Europe, because somebody called Castello Garen was in Germany. I was based in London. But of course, I live in Reading, south of London. I represented the SPLM, the United, until the signing of the Khartoum Peace Agreement, when Riek Machar and I differed. My difference with him was that the Khartoum Peace Agreement was extremely very local. And my argument was that we need an international component to it. Without this international component, I told him that this agreement will collapse. And therefore, I'm not going to Khartoum. And I went to Bush House, London. Many of you might have heard it, I don't know. I went and broadcasted my resignation from SPLM United, and I condemned the peace agreement, and I went home. So, because of that association, we knew ourselves with Dr. Riek Machar. So I know Dr. Riek Machar as a person and as a politician. So when I rang him after the formation of GRECO, that I was in Addis and we were joining the process of political reforms, he asked me whether I was going to fight alone in Equatoria or we were going to fight together. I told him that we are going to fight together, but as allies, that I was not going to fight under him. Now, let me define fight here. Fight, this is a political process. But if the government in Juba abuse its sovereign power, which also includes the abuse of sovereign violence to attack GRECO, then GRECO, like an individual, it is a legal entity. Just like a human person, GRECO has the right to defend itself. And therefore, the fight against or for reforms in South Sudan, therefore, is characterized by two levels. We are not on the offensive, we are on the defensive. So, if need be, we can be on the offensive defense. At any rate, so the association with Dr. Riek Machar and the SPLM in opposition is as allies, not as co-opted others. And I explained to him that GRECO will struggle in Greater Equatoria for the aspirations of the peoples of Greater Equatoria towards a federal government, towards the writing of democratic constitution, towards comprehensive overhauling of institutions of governance, towards the establishment of federal police in Greater Equatoria and other institutions of governance. Therefore, I'm not, or we as GRECO are not actually fighting under anybody. We are as independent as any other entity in South Sudan. But we are fighting at political levels and other levels with other South Sudanese who would like to produce a positive, inclusive, democratic, human rights respecting South Sudan. You have suggested federal system of government, the structure which may definitely be finalized in the permanent constitution writing during interim period, but similar calls are being made by the three governors of Equatoria and the SPLM in opposition. Do you have links with both groups? I have linked with the SPLM in opposition. We have agreed in the nature and the structures of federal government. And we have agreed in the nature and the structure of the army, that the army must be a representative army, i.e. all the three states of South Sudan must be represented equally. If the army was supposed to be composed of 9,000 officers and men, it will be 3,000 in each state. About the three governors in Equatoria, immediately after the press conference in which we announced the formation of GRECO, the three governors reacted and asked Colonel Bocasero to call a press conference in which they stated that GRECO is not mandated by Equatorians to say what it has said. But Bocasero, being a very intelligent governor, he said that GRECO is formed by our brothers and sisters. We differ with them. And I think he's the most intelligent governor of all. because to differ is the essence of politics. And he stated political wisdom that we are his brothers and sisters. But he doesn't agree with us. He did not say that, he did not call us names. And that's the essence of politics. You are supposed to differ in politics. You don't just agree because somebody is your relative. So for that, I respect you. I respect you so much. But the other governors call us names, which is a very underdeveloped political thinking. Because we're talking about issues which are above ethnicities, above personal interests. We're talking about public interests. We're talking about the interests of others. We in Greco, for example, we did not form Greco in order to create jobs for ourselves. We want to create the opportunity in which others will have jobs. We want to create opportunities in which others will have access to these medical services and educational services which we are complaining about. And that is the essence of political work. We in Greco do not consider political work as a process of generating individual income. Because the majority of us in Greco have got our own sources of personal income. For myself, speaking for myself, I don't need to be a minister at all in order to survive. I'm 60 now. So why should I identify myself with a political cause? I better live my life and die peacefully without being accused of stealing something. So what simply we are doing is that we want to contribute to positive reformation of South Sudan, so that we create a peaceful, loving, inclusive South Sudan for the next 50 years. And some of us are not going to be there. So therefore, we are very selfless others in Greco. We are not thinking about ourselves. We are thinking about the other people in Great Equatoria. And as for links between the three governors and Greco, well, we are linked up by political arguments, if that is correct way of putting it. But we are also linked up by the people of Great Equatoria who have chosen sides, and I'm very proud to say that the majority of people of Equatoria have chosen the side of Greco. That what Greco is talking about, even though later on they produce statements and they put together 6 people to go to Addis, this is only a reactive situation. They were reacting to the declaration of Greco because they were so frightened that Greco might displace them as governors. We don't want to displace them. If we want to displace them, we shall displace them not with us, but with some of you from diaspora. Some of you can go and become governors once the spaces are created. So they have the right to get politically agitated because they look at politics from inward direction, while we look at it from outward direction. So these are the kind of linkages. The other question is, do you have any proposed government structure for the interim period that your group can present today? Yes, we have discussed this at length. We have discussed this at length, and we're working on this proposal. In fact, one of the reasons why we are here today is that we would like you in diaspora not to think of yourself as spectators. We would like you to think of yourselves as crucial players in this interim government. I've spoken to our brothers and sisters in Canada, America, and elsewhere, that while we are moving towards the stages of formation of the interim government, we should be able to have names from diaspora who should also take part in this interim government. That the interim government should not be only considered as if it will be occupied by people inside the South Sudan, because you are an extension of South Sudan abroad. So you should also think of yourself as parties that will take part in the constitution of the interim government. And the interim government that we visualize is going to be a representative interim government, where all the 3 regions shall be represented, where youth shall be represented, where women, in fact, according to our manifesto, women should be represented by 40% in this interim government, because we are convinced that the ubiquitous absence of women in government structures in South Sudan is also a contributory factor to us men misbehaving in governance.